I don't know. Say it with me. I don't know. Good God, it is liberating. I am a towering mountain of ignorance. I don't know. We're taught to believe that everything has a reason. And so we observe the world, we see what happened, and then we define the thing that happened as the reason the thing happened. But I think a lot of the time we end up mixing up thinking something with knowing something. This is why it can be so impossible to talk about certain topics with certain people. They've tied those suppositions to themselves so tightly with knots of narrative and constructed reality and values that there's just no untying it. And maybe unsurprisingly, in those situations, the best course of action is just to be friends. Maybe even ask them about that thing that they've created, because to them, it's immensely valuable. The world as we perceive it, as we've built it inside of ourselves, is a lie that we tell to ourselves, not out of deception, but out of necessity. We have no other choice. We simply cannot understand the world as it is, and so we construct. But sometimes I just have to tell myself the thing that is definitely true, the truest thing I can say, which is that I don't know.
Never know.
This is the Everyone's Agnostic Podcast with Bob Pondillo and Cass Midgley.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 131 of the Everyone's Agnostic Podcast. I'm Cass Midgley. Today, Dr. Bob Pondillo and I interview Amber Cantorna. Amber was raised evangelical Christian and homeschooled. Her father works for Focus on the Family and has for more than 30 years. At age 27, she came out to her parents as gay, and they disowned her, regarding her as dead. Sounds like a practice they borrowed from Sharia Law. Today she's 32, married to her wife, and they're both Christians. Amber's book, Refocusing My Family, Coming Out, Being Cast Out, and Discovering the True Love of God, is set to release in early 2017. As an ex-Christian myself, I find that my sense of how comfortable I am being around Christians has a lot to do with the doctrines they personally hold to. It's been said that progressive or liberal Christians have more in common with us atheists than they do with fundamentalist evangelicals, and I think it's true. Many of us who have rejected Christianity are able to look back at the damage it did to us. I see many damaging effects of Christian doctrines on society. Just to name a few, the concept of eternal life diminishes a person's ability to be present and concerned with reality. The concept of reward and punishment in the afterlife inhibits people's ability to grow up, to think for oneself, to determine one's own personal ethics, and contributes to a divisive, sectarian view of others, thus enhancing the potential for judgment, superiority, violence, and an us versus them mentality. In other words, it makes them an asshole. Hell forces one to suppress and compartmentalize one's natural sense of connectedness to all things in order to be okay with human beings being tortured forever. This hardens the heart and numbs one's innate sense of compassion. It narrows one's capacity to empathize with all humans by removing empathy from those outside the tribe. It promotes in-group loyalty and out-group derogation. The concepts of heaven and hell falsely satisfy the innate human need for justice, inoculating one's ability to acknowledge that in reality, life is not fair. It's random, chaotic, and justice rarely happens. This harsh reality is too much for some to bear, and they hide under the delusion that someday God is going to right every wrong, further postponing their own maturation. To quote psychologist Scott McGreal, belief in hell at a national level is probably associated with greater support for retributive policies such as capital punishment and torture, as well as with prejudice against people who violate religious norms, such as gays. Aside from being an extremely cruel thing to believe in, the idea of hell may have done more harm to society than good." Unquote. So perhaps you can understand why I'm apprehensive to build a friendship with a person who believes in heaven and hell. They can admire the teachings of Jesus, hold loosely to the Christian doctrines, and I find I'm not as suspicious or nervous around them than if I know that deep down they're okay with a God who tortures those who reject him and trains his followers to be servile, infantile, and void of agency. Not all Christian doctrines are toxic, but some of the most fundamental core tenets are deeply damaging to the individual who buys into them and to the societies where a majority of the population adhere to them. The most violent countries are the most religious, and the least violent countries are the least religious. These jealous gods abhor the goodness of man and freedom of humans to find their own path without the aid of a celestial dictator. Thus, the followers of these jealous gods distrust and deny their own innate sense of morality, and thereby turn morality on its head, calling evil that which natural humans regard as good, and calling good such things as ignorance, stupidity, and servility. Knowing this about Christianity can be the difference in religiously mixed couples staying together or divorcing. A couple like the Thompsons, featured on episode 111, get along great because neither are radical fundamentalists within their own beliefs. This is one reason I like to elevate the agnosticism that all humans share. Certainty, rigidity, and fear are destroyers of relationships. If one or both parties are, as Peter Montoya put it in episode 130, 0% capitulation and 100% capitalization, then they are at an impasse. Sometimes the Christian accuses their atheist partner of being intolerant of their faith, and this may in fact be happening when the atheist attacks their partner's Christianity on purely judgmental terms, like, you have to be stupid to believe. However, if the atheist is positing that the beliefs their Christian partner holds to are immoral and have lowered the character and integrity of that partner, that's a much more robust argument for establishing irreconcilable differences. Remember, one thing that it's okay to be intolerant of is intolerance itself, meaning we're all free to believe what we want. But if one or both parties deem the other's beliefs as depreciating the value of the relationship, or in fact disgusts one or both of them, then no covenant or promise that was made on an altar years ago should lock anyone into a situation that is draining the life out of them. Here again, though, Christianity can foster a lack of agency on the part of the Christian to protect their own pursuit of happiness and oblige them to a higher power to stay in a toxic environment. Not so with the free thinker. So there's my thoughts on whether or not I can respect or be friends with a Christian. Rigid, immutable beliefs and toxic ideologies limit, if not eliminate, my desire to spend time with that person. If they believe in a literal hell or even are hesitant to take a stand on it, that's a deal breaker for me. That's not me being intolerant of their faith. That's me protecting my own happiness. As I mentioned, our guest today is Amber Cantorna. Amber's an activist, author, and speaker with a heart for people who find themselves at the intersection of their faith and their sexuality. She strives to bridge the gap between two seemingly opposing communities. She has been featured in Huffington Post's religion column, as well as on Liberal America and other writing mediums. We taped this conversation on November 21st, 2016. We interview people you don't know about a subject no one wants to talk about. We hope to encourage people in the process of deconstructing their faith and help curb the loneliness that accompanies it. We think the world would be a better place when more people live by sight, not by faith. Please subscribe to our podcast, give it 5 stars, and/or leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Our show is available on most podcast platforms. Also, you can support us monetarily in 2 easy ways. You can pledge $1 per episode through Patreon. That's patreon.com/EA podcast. Or you can leave a lump sum donation through PayPal at our website, everyone'sagnostic.com. Our opening monologue is an excerpt from a YouTube by Hank Green titled Towering Mountain of Ignorance. The music behind it is Never Know by Jack Johnson. The segue music on this episode is performed by Sam Mayer on a handpan in the New York City subway. Thanks for listening, and be a yes-sayer to what is.
Hello, Amber. Hi.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you? This is Bob.
I'm good, thanks.
Okay.
Hey, nice to meet you, Bob.
Nice to meet you. I'm shaking your hand here. And
virtually.
Virtually, yes. And this is Cass over here.
Hi, Amber.
Hey, Cass, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for for being willing to talk to us.
Do we have?
Oh, sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah,
I can.
you hear you
It
great.
sounds good.
Good deal.
So, I work at Vanderbilt in the anthropology department. I manage the office there.
Uh-huh.
And Sophie Bjork James is one of the professors there.
Yes, I got the chance to meet her this last year.
Yeah, well, she knows about my podcast. I mean, everybody in the department knows about it. And she came by and she said, "Hey, I think I've got a good potential guest for you." And she told me about you, and I said, "Yeah, of course." And I think you probably know that I myself am a deconverted evangelical Christian. I was a minister in first 39 years of my life, and I'm 50 now, and I've been an atheist for about 6 or 7 years, but that whole process was stair-stepped. You're probably familiar with some of the more progressive Christian authors like Rob Bell.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
Brian McLaren was probably my biggest deal. Like, I read him like a maniac. And
Really?
yeah, like
He just actually came to our church about 2 weeks ago, and I didn't get to go to his event, so I was really disappointed about that.
he is a fantastic guy. He's a great thinker and a great orator. And, he helped me hang on. I mean, for the longest time, I mean, in many ways, I was disgruntled with my faith, and he...
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the name of his first book that I read was A New Kind of Christianity,
Yeah.
And it was fiction, and it was a trilogy, but it changed my world. And
Wow. Yeah.
and one of the factors, which is obviously going to be the issue today, was that he was LGBT affirming, and I wanted to be that, but
Right.
the tradition I was coming out of was in conflict with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely.
So I started this show to help people on the journey of deconverting. And a lot of times it can be an extremely lonely experience and painful, and it can cost them loved ones, like people, break off, as you well know, and we'll talk about that. But but the loneliness is part of what we address, and we're on like 130 episodes now or so, and I would say at least 30 of those 130 were and are still Christians. The others are probably full-blown atheists, but or agnostics or free thinkers or secularists or all these terms. So you're not the only one that we've interviewed that has remained, a Christian.
Right.
So I just wanted to set that up front to say, we're not here to attack your Christianity or anything.
And Amber, it never stuck to me at all. So I'm completely. I've been atheist, and I haven't even thought about it for the longest time. But I met Cass, and we hit it off. So that's why I'm sort of the clack in the back. I ask questions.
Well, and his perspective is one of lifelong atheism, and mine is, I'm a deconverted, and so we get those two perspectives, and so I guess tell us a little bit about your the religious context of your upbringing. You were raised in Colorado Springs, I take it, or?
I was actually born in Montana, but then we moved for a few years to the Los Angeles area when my dad got a job at Refocusing My Family. And so I was really young, and don't have a lot of memories there. But then when Focus relocated to Colorado Springs in 91, then we relocated with them as well. So primarily grew up in Colorado Springs, which, is kind of the epicenter for a lot of Christian ministries.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the environment that I grew up in, was that mainly evangelical. I had kind of in my younger years attended some Nazarene churches, but mainly evangelical kind of upbringing. And then on top of that, I was also homeschooled, which is kind of even a smaller, cocoon and bubble that we, subset of that we kind of both my younger brother and I grew up in. And so I think in a lot of ways we were very cocooned, and I think that was intentional in a lot of ways on my parents'. Sure. Because they wanted to protect me from the outside world, which, all good intentions. But I think in a lot of ways ended up kind of setting me up for failure in the long run, because I wasn't equipped to really handle the real world in a lot of ways. And so that has taken time and experience and, kind of 2 steps forward, 1 step back a lot of times too.
Sure. Wow. So tell me about your brother. Is he still a Christian, and does he embrace your homosexuality or whatever?
He is still a Christian. He's based in Austin, and he actually moved there as part of a church plant. So he is still very much involved in the Christian evangelical realm. And, I had hopes, and I'm sure we'll get to this, but I did have hopes when I came out to him that he would be, kind of my ally through all this. Mm-hmm. And in the beginning, I actually came out to him the night before I came out to my parents, and things seemed to go fairly well. And, he said, I don't necessarily understand, but I'm sure I'll have a lot of questions, but it's certainly not something that I would disown you over, Mm-hmm. Yeah, and right. So I felt like, okay, we're in a decent place that, maybe he will be the one that really stands by me. And then when everything went down with my parents, I think he ended up feeling caught in the middle. Yeah. Kind of stuck choosing sides, and he ended up siding with them. And
okay, so let's talk about the reaction of your parents. How did they react, and what is your relationship with them now?
It's been almost 5 years since I came out to them. Mm-hmm. And in the years leading up to that, I had kind of already started pulling away because I knew this was something that I was struggling with, and I knew that sharing that with them would cause them, of course, to want to help me or save me or get, me involved in something like Exodus or Love One Out, where they
conversion
therapy or ex-gay therapy. And I knew that wasn't the answer. I think I knew deep down that this was something that I had to journey on for myself and find out what I believed, because I had a lot of my life kind of relied on my parents' beliefs, and sure. That had shaped a lot of who I had become. Mm-hmm. And so I knew that this was something that I really needed to figure out for myself. And to be honest, I was terrified no matter what the answer was going to be, because I knew that whether I discovered that God was okay with me being gay or God was not okay with me being gay, that my life was drastically going to change no matter what. Sure. And so the reality of that terrified me, but I knew that I had to discover it on my own. And so I went through a journey of several years of kind of doing some research on theology and trying to shape my own beliefs around what I thought God said on this topic. And when I came to a place where I felt solid and at peace with who I was, it was like my whole life just kind of fell into place. I think a lot of my life I felt like I didn't belong and I was different, but I don't think I knew why, and I didn't have the vocabulary to put with that. Mm-hmm. I think part of that comes from being cocooned and not really having exposure to other gay people or other minority groups. And so I really was very sheltered in a lot of ways, even though I was very socially active it was all within that safe Christian bubble.
Yeah. How old were you 5 years ago when this happened?
I came out, I'm 32 now, so I came out at 27.
Okay, but you certainly probably knew something was up earlier than that, I would think.
Yeah, what age did you realize you were gay?
Yeah.
Well, I can't say that I actually realized I was gay until I was in my early 20s, because I was a huge part of the purity culture as well. And so at age 13, I took
You were abstaining from everything.
And so I really had no exposure to dating at all. I had never dated, and a big part of me didn't really feel the need to. I think part of me was like, oh, God's just saving me from all that heartache, and when the time is right, he will bring the perfect man along, and we will meet in happily ever after, and everything will be great, Mm-hmm. But I don't think I realized at the time that disinterest also stemmed from something deeper, mm-hmm. and that while a lot of my friends were out dating, I was not interested, but it wasn't necessarily for the reasons I thought. And so it took some time before I realized that there was something deeper underlying, because I hadn't ever dated, mm-hmm. to gain that experience. Wow. And so when I kind of came into that realization, then not only did I feel fooled by a lot of what I had been taught to believe, right. and disappointed in a lot of the purity culture movement, but it also brought me to the greater realization that I was gay, and that spun me on a whole nother journey of trying to discover what that meant, because really all that I knew of homosexuality as a kid was that it was bad, that it was people who were heathens that, slept around and partied and just turned their back on God and everything bad you could imagine. When that suddenly became me, initially there was a ton of shame to deconstruct, because this was something that you were never supposed to be, you know?
Right.
And if there was, I mean, I think on the realm of bad things you could do as a Christian, this was about as bad as it came, you know?
Right.
Even beyond getting, having sex outside of marriage or getting pregnant, or, you know, I think this was the biggest shock my parents could have ever had.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So when you're going through that in your own head, I mean, you realize it. I mean, there's one thing that we know growing up in Christianity is that we are sinners, we are fallen, and it gets even worse as far as there's no good in you, you're depraved, and without Jesus, you deserve hell. And so there's a lot of self-debasing and deprecating mindsets, and so you already feel, you know, like you're a broken vessel and needs fixing. Well, this comes along, and like you said, it's kind of on the scale and the rankings of sins. It's high up there.
Yeah.
Right.
And so you become a pariah. You become like even worse than just a regular sinner. You're the worst of the worst.
Yeah.
And I imagine you set out probably Googling like, oh my gosh, or, you know, because there's a lot of stuff out there. There's a lot of, I forget the young man's name, that came about 5 years ago. He kind of became popular with a video that he made because he was gay and he wanted to remain.
Matthew Vines.
Matthew Vines, and that one went viral.
Yeah.
And I know that opened up a lot of doors. And like I said, with people like Brian McLaren and such, they were already saying such things. And then I was a big fan of... golly, I'm not that big a fan because I can't do but it's been a long time. But she's a female Christian singer.
Jennifer Knapp.
Jennifer Knapp, man. When I was a Christian, I freaking loved her, you know?
Yeah.
And saw her at Cornerstone Fest, and I was just a big fan. And then when she came out, by then I was already an atheist, so I didn't care. I was like, good for you, you know?
Yeah, and what's funny is that we've ended up connecting, and we're working together now on her Inside Out Faith project of helping people in the process of deconstructing their faith in the midst of their sexuality and all that.
Wow. So fantastic! You know,
that did work quite well.
Ironically, I saw her on campus a couple of weeks ago on the Vanderbilt.
Yeah,
she's at Vanderbilt Divinity right now.
I did.
Yeah, she is.
Well, how would you? I mean, she's not that big a name outside the Christian bubble, but.
Well, Cass also went to Vanderbilt Divinity.
Yeah, and I worked there. So when I saw her, I was a little starstruck, so I didn't say anything to her. But I was just happy to see her there, and I have lots of friends there, and it's a great program. I love the VDS, the Vanderbilt Divinity School. It's a fantastic place, and I'm actually just really excited to hear that you're working with her too. I mean,
I think she's really excited about going there and what she's learning and all that. So I just saw her not too long ago, and we had a great conversation about it. So.
I was just Googling some other things in preparation for the show, and there was one of my favorite bands in Christian music was Everyday Sunday, and Trey Pearson is, I think, either the lead singer or some part of that band, and he came out. And there's been others come out, but is it kind of hasn't it kind of, I don't know that Christian bookstores will stock.
No, they will not.
No, yeah.
They will not. And it's kind of, I think it's snowballing recently where more and more people are starting to come out, these public figures, that we've looked up to for years in the evangelical Christian realm, and they're starting to kind of come out of the woodworks more and more.
I think to go way back, David Meese, didn't he come out? Do you know David Meese?
I don't know. Huh?
All right. Well, his famous song was "We Are the Reason."
Oh yeah.
He gave his life.
Yeah. I know that song. Yeah.
It's an amazing song. Well, anyway, years later he came out, and then Ray Boltz.
Yep.
And he probably had the most famous Christian song of all time called "Thank You."
Thank you. Yep.
Yeah,
I
I worked Christian bookstores, and I worked for Spectre for a while, which we packaged his CDs and stuff. So yeah, I'm just listing some of the people that are have come out. I remember back. Well, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, and most recently, one of the big people that's taken a stand in the face of the election was Jen Hatmaker, and I
don't know that name.
And I wasn't real familiar with her name either, but it sounds like she's kind of been really up and coming in the evangelical world, which, I've been a little more estranged from in recent years. But but it sounded like she had kind of become the new Beth Moore and, Joyce Meyer type figure in among some of these younger evangelicals. And she had taken a stand on not only for women, but for LGBT people.
As an ally?
as an ally.
Okay.
And they've taken all her stuff out of the Christian bookstores and totally, just kind of given her the boot. So it's been really unfortunate to see that, but really excited to see more allies rising up within the Christian community.
So I don't know that we got the full punch of your parents' reaction. I just kind of detoured us there for a second. But,
That's okay.
So
what happened when you told them?
So when I finally came to the point of coming out, it was really, it was getting to the point where living a lie was harder than telling the truth.
Yeah, sure.
And once I finally had it settled in my own spirit, I felt like I had no choice but to be honest. Mm-hmm. And so I did it out of a place of authenticity, and I, got them together and shared with them that, I just wanted to share some things on my heart with them. And so we sat around in my living room one day, and I told them kind of the journey that I had been on and tried to really emphasize that, that this had only made my relationship with God stronger, because I knew that would be their biggest fear was that I, had turned my back on God or whatever. And so I tried to emphasize the fact that this had really strengthened my faith. And they, from the very get-go, did not receive it well. In fact, my dad just looked at me and he was like, "I have nothing to say to you." And he got up and walked out. Mm-hmm. Wow. And so that was just the beginning of a kind of our falling out. And I didn't hear from them for several weeks after that. Mm-hmm. And when I did, we about 3 weeks later sat and had another conversation, and he by that time had kind of, I think, collected some more of their thoughts, but still didn't communicate them in a very loving manner, and ended up, just telling me that they felt like I had died and that I had turned my back on God and everything they ever taught me, and that this was the most selfish thing I could do to the family, and compared me to murderers and pedophiles and bestiality, and to them this was the worst possible thing that I could do, and and they did the worst possible thing that they could do. Right.
So let me just back up. When I was in the Christian world, there were several meetings that I had to make with pastors or people where this was going to be a tough conversation. And I remember praying weeks in advance, fasting in preparation for such a meeting. And then on the day of the meeting, just almost having tunnel vision, like the world doesn't exist, just this moment and this meeting, and then literally putting myself, like in your case, in that living room, about to open my mouth and share something, and the world hangs in the balance in those nanoseconds, and it is so hard, and to get to that place and have the courage to set that meeting and to sit down and to have that rejection. I know you're 5 years out, and so you're probably the tenderness of the pain. It might be a little, time heals some wounds, but I'm just feeling the gravitas of that moment, and how you're. I mean, right before your eyes, your world was collapsing. Yeah. And really, I mean, a lot of that has been stuff that I've had to relive this year as I've been writing my book and my memoir. I've had to sit and look at these things that I've kind of wanted to ignore a lot for the last few years, because they are still very painful and very tender for me. And some of that has been healing, and some of it just really stings still. And in fact, we had somebody speaking at our church yesterday that was the granddaughter of a very public figure in the evangelical realm, and hearing her story and the way that her family reacted, saying, when she came out, that this changes nothing and we still love you. And that, here I am in the audience still crying, because we were cut from the same cloth, and yet the reaction my family had was so vastly different that, and that was just yesterday.
Was your dad more against it than your mom, or was
they took a very united front, and I have people ask me a lot who I feel like is behind this more, and I really don't know. They've provided a very united front in the way that they've approached everything the whole time, and so I can't tell who is the driving force behind it.
But Amber, you're not naive to how patriarchal the focus on the family world is.
Correct. Correct.
So I think we could at least speculate that the United Front is a part of her submission to her authoritarian husband. I mean,
your mom's submission.
Yeah, I do believe that could be a huge part of it. I also know that my mom was, raised in a very Christian home. My dad was not. My dad actually grew up Catholic and didn't become a Christian until he was, I think, 17. And so my mom was raised in a Christian home from the get-go and really has never known anything outside of that Christian bubble.
Right.
And so I think her roots are, equally as deep.
Yeah.
And
it's just all she knows.
That's all she's known. She's never, and she never went to college or had some of that outside world experience. So that really is all she's ever known.
And I can speak from experience because as good a guy as I think I am and as affirming to my wife and empowering of my wife I think that I've been, like your mother, I was raised in it and it was just the water we swam in. I mean, it wasn't anything other than just the normal roles of male and female husband and wife. I wear the pants. The buck stops with me. We might discuss the decisions that the family's going to make, but I make the final decision, and it ends with me.
Right.
And end of discussion type thing. And as good as I thought I was, well, my wife and I are now realizing, and because she's 48, I'm 50, so we're kind of midlife as well. We're post-Christian. She's pre-menopause. She's post-maternal. I mean, our kids we're empty nesters. So our lives are up in the air, and in so many ways. And she and I both are discovering how much I have bullied her. And I'm having to own up to it, and it ain't fun.
No.
Yeah.
And I'm having to help her, find her voice. She's asking, who am I and what do I want from my life?
Right.
And I'm trying to get out of the way as much as I can, but it's inbred almost into our marriage. We've been married 30 years.
Wow. Amber, I have a question for you. Now, does your dad still work for Focus on the Family?
He sure does.
Oh, he does. Okay.
He does.
For those who don't know, a lot of people don't know about this. It's a very conservative, sort of a watchdog group. How would you explain what Focus on the Family is?
I would say it's a very conservative Christian organization, primarily evangelical, but their whole goal is focused on building healthy family relationships and marriages. And so, unfortunately, they kind of failed,
Fail.
In this
irony
aspect,
is alive.
as I've wrestled with this, I'm like, I feel like they failed me because here it is, the time when you need your family the most, and they abandoned me. And so their mission in that realm really failed. But I think my parents thought that by kind of ostracizing me and pushing me away that I would eventually feel so alone that I would turn around and come running back to them. Yeah. And that just, wasn't the case, obviously.
I hate tough love. I've said it on the show many times before. I think it's bullshit.
But I can't understand a daddy who put you on his knee as a little girl and all these wonderful little things that happen when you're a kid, and then to look at the child and say, you're nothing to me. You're dead to me.
Yeah.
My God, what type of heart do you have to do that?
Yeah.
And I'm sure that's the kind of stuff you're dealing with too.
It is. And, and I think a huge part of my pain, especially in relation to my dad, is that essentially he chose his career over his own daughter.
Yeah. Well,
and that's very hard for me to grapple with. He was concerned about his job, his reputation to thousands of people who listen to what he does. He was concerned about what this would mean for the family's reputation, and appearances were always very strongly emphasized in our family. And I attribute that just as much to my mom, if not more, than my dad. But that was a huge part of it. And so to look at me and say, I'm embarrassed by you because of what this means for my job and how this makes me look to thousands of people,
Does he also say that, okay, so you're talking about appearances and external reasons to stay or keep you at bay. What about, would your mom or he say, we have to remain loyal to God?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. They've told me that they will choose God over their own child. Yeah. They love God more than they love me.
Allah Akbar.
I see what you mean.
Yeah.
God is great.
Yeah.
It's just a loyalty that is just,
It is.
So one of the things that you've got going on, a project you're working on now, is you're writing a book, and the title is Refocusing My Family, coming out, being cast out, and discovering the true love of God.
Yes.
How's that coming? I know that you're...
Oh my gosh, it has been quite the work in progress.
Yeah, sure, it's hard work.
It's hard work, not just writing, but memoirs especially are difficult in kind of putting your life on the line and letting it be critiqued, in such a intimate way. And so it's been a journey for me, and I think in many ways very eye-opening journey as I've gone back and had to sift through a lot of my childhood and my upbringing, and a lot of those memories, some very tender and beautiful, and some, very painful realizations. Mm-hmm. And so it's been in many ways very cathartic and therapeutic for me, and in some ways very difficult. But I think overall a very good process for me to look at my life from this perspective. And it's coming together. We're kind of in the final stages of editing and with the manuscript, and we've settled on the title. They're designing the cover right now, and we should be setting a release date in the next couple of weeks.
Who's the publisher?
Fortress Press, who is an offshoot of Osberg. So
okay.
Are you familiar with Osberg?
Yeah, I've heard of it. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
That's great. So it should be nationwide. It should be
yes.
out in bookstores soon.
Yes.
So what in the 5 years? Well, see, we're taping this. The Monday before Thanksgiving. It'll be out probably closer to Christmas by the time it's published, when people are listening to it. But either way, we're talking about family gatherings. What in the last 5 years? What have you been doing with these family gatherings?
Holidays I think are still one of the hardest times for me.
You don't go, right?
No. I have about. Coming out from the very beginning was obviously very bad, but it only got worse over time as I ended up then, meeting Clara, who is now my wife, and we dated and got engaged and, got married. And I think for my parents, they were hoping that this would be a phase or something that I would realize I was wrong about, or turn around and come back. They, would say, the door is always open if you want to come back to Jesus and come back to us. And so I think that they had great hopes that this would somehow pass. And when I got engaged and got married, it really solidified that.
And they doubled down.
And they did, yeah. And they just cut all ties completely.
Okay.
And so we really have had virtually no contact for well over 2 years.
Well, before I forget, congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Much happiness.
Yeah, it's a weird balance, because even in the midst of all the grief of losing my family and losing so many friends and my hometown and community, I still find so much joy and so much peace with who I am, and I feel like I'm happier than I've ever been in my life.
That's because you met your wife.
Yeah.
And,
it really,
it's
just, it feels like all these pieces that before were kind of disjointed in my life have suddenly settled into place. And I feel so at peace, and I feel so much joy in my life with her that we share, and so much hope for our future. And that doesn't mean that I don't, still very much miss my family and miss, have times of grieving still. But I really, I feel so much joy in the midst of that.
Yeah. So what's your wife's name again?
It's Clara?
Clara. Uh-huh.
Okay, so your marriage, especially when the book comes out, is kind of in the limelight. And I wonder if Clara and maybe yourself combined feel. I mean, the truth is that straight and gay relationships hit the rocks sometimes, and sometimes they don't make it. In fact, 50% of marriages don't make it, no matter if it's gay or straight. But I think gay couples have somewhat of I wouldn't use the word advantage, but they do. By the time they have married and made it, I mean, they've overcome so many more hurdles than straight couples that they probably are their relationship is much more tough and interwoven and bound up in so many ties and strengths because of all you've been through to get to that place.
Yeah.
a place that straight couples kind of flippantly fall into sometimes.
Yeah.
Right.
Sometimes you don't even think about it, I'm sure.
Yeah, you go to Vegas on a whim and get married. Well, no, not so in the gay community or whatever.
Yeah.
So I gotta know. I'm just going to throw that out as far as does Claire ever voice any concerns about how much you guys are being watched?
She doesn't. She's very political herself, even more so than I am.
Activistic.
And very activist. And
so
very
she's out and proud.
And so she is definitely very supportive of everything that I'm doing and is right there along beside me in
Awesome.
a lot of it. And so I think she, a lot of the conferences and things that I've attended and networking I've done, she's been right there alongside me because she enjoys learning and growing just as much as I do.
That's
and
fantastic.
So we've really enjoyed the process together. Even I'm the one that's kind of more in the limelight, and they're definitely, she knows she's being watched, and but I think we both had to overcome so much, like you said, to get to where we are in our lives.
Oh, yeah.
And so that does, I think, naturally make us stronger. And I think even, as people were watching, because we got engaged fairly quickly. We had only dated for about 8 months before we were engaged. But at that time, we both knew that this is what we wanted. And we had both been through so much and so many years of loneliness and isolation in our struggles that we just felt like, why wait? We're not 21. We're well into our, adult life, and we know what we want and feel like this is where we want to be. And so there's really no reason for us to prolong something. And so I think it was the best decision we could have made.
Excellent.
And even in the midst of struggles and hard times and
Sure.
we still have just, I think it's by far the best part of my life.
Did Clara go through anything similar to you? I mean, was her parents?
She's a Christian, right?
Yeah.
She is a Christian, but she knew she was gay all of her life. She never had to come into it the way that I did. She knew from the time she was 5 that she was gay.
Wow.
So that was a very different experience for her. She's Filipino and was born in the Philippines but raised in Hawaii. And so the Asian culture, was very different than the kind of culture that I grew up in, but she grew up Baptist. So a lot of her beliefs still stemmed around, a very strong Christian base. And so she didn't officially come out until more like when she was in college. She still went through some of that inner struggle that, so many of us do. But she did end up turning her back on God for a good long time. She was hurt. She was angry. She was upset over the way, some of the things in her life had played out, and then ended up kind of coming back to the faith not real long before her and I met. And so it's been kind of neat to see our faith evolve together as we've learned and grown. And her family has not always been supportive, but they have come a long ways in their acceptance of us. And they both, her whole family did come and attend our wedding, which was a really big deal and really a healing time for her. And she's not ever been close with her family the way that I was close with mine. But it's been neat to see the relationships that have kind of developed there, even in the time that we've been together.
Sure. Well, talk about your faith then. How do you still hang on to something that treated you so badly, or at least...
Yeah, I think one of the most pivotal things for me has been that I've had to separate my own personal experience with God from what people have done to me in the name of God.
Okay, yeah.
Because, growing up in the evangelical world, I had a lot of really precious times and experiences on a personal level with God. And I think that developed a stronger foundation to carry me through the harder times. I feel like there's so much going on right now, especially in the evangelical movement, that is so contrary to what I believe.
81% of them voted for Trump. There's some contrary shit going on.
It's just been devastating to us because, the ramifications that has on us in the minority groups that we are a part of, and I just feel like it represents nothing that Jesus is. Yeah. And, Jesus as a person was for the minority groups. He was for the people. He was for the poor. He was for, and so to see people in the name of God doing things that are so harmful to so many people has been really heartbreaking for us.
Yeah, sure.
So Amber, do you know Corey Benjamin or Benjamin Corey?
I do. Yeah, I do know him.
Benjamin.
Well, we had him on the show a couple of years ago, and he's one of those, and I still follow him on Facebook, and so I can see his advocacy all the time. Yeah. Roger Walsey?
No, I don't know that name.
Well, see, he's University of Colorado Boulder, so I would.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but he's Methodist and very progressive and very LGBT ally. So they're out there and they're doing their best and they're pushing back against this Trump shit. They're getting and obviously all the xenophobia and misogyny, and there's just so much work to do. Now, what do you say? I know Christians, maybe even your own parents, or at least people in your old world have said to you, hey, you can't just make God in your own image. You can't just cherry pick the Bible.
Like we do.
Yeah,
because that's what they do.
And that's my point.
That's exactly what they do all the time.
I want them to hear themselves say that. I want so badly to hear themselves say that. Like, look in the mirror. And so I mean, have you ever had to have that conversation with somebody?
Well, my parents, brought that up early on about, well, you can't pick and choose to make the Bible what you want it to be, and and I think in my own discovery of the Bible, I was raised on a very literal reading and interpretation. So for me, it was a process of going and reading from a historical context, from the culture and the time in which it was written. And those are a lot of the things that really set me free to see what some of those, the clobber passages, as I referred to, were being used against us. But if you go and, actually really do your research, you realize that that's not at all referring to what we know today as, committed monogamous same-sex relationships. But my parents, they did try and throw that at me very early on about, well, you can't pick and choose, but that's exactly what they're doing, and
for sure.
I don't think that I was as well versed in my theology at the time as I am now, with several years of training and stuff. But but I think Christians as a whole are very guilty of doing that all the time. They pick and choose things, and they do what makes them comfortable, and they like to kind of stay within their own little box. And I really think, fear is what holds them back on a lot of these things, because if you take like the issue of gay Christians or, any number of things, if you do the research and you find out, oh, well, God doesn't really condemn that the way I thought he did, it puts a crack in your foundation. And then, well, if I'm wrong about that, what else could I be wrong about? And suddenly your whole foundation of faith is crumbling.
And they're terrorized by those kind of questions.
And they're terrified by that. And so I think that's a lot of where my parents probably come from. And I can't say that I blame them, for that, because I had to face that myself and face that fear. But over time, I have certainly gotten less answers and more questions.
Sure. Amber, how do you hang on to any of it? I mean, it's just such a, well, this is me talking. I'm going to say it's such a crazy, there's so many unusual notions in it. What do you do about hell? And what do you do about virgin birth? And what do you do about rising into the heavens and those kind of things?
Yeah.
When the only way you're going to rise into heavens is if you're on a spaceship or something. I mean, all these supernatural notions that you just have to put aside, that are completely untestable, unknowable, and yet you still hang on.
Yeah, I think I've had to become very comfortable in the kind of agnostic part of my faith, of not knowing all the answers and being okay with that, and being okay with wonder and mystery. And it's actually very freeing from my background of, kind of having to have all the answers, and everything was laced up all the time, and kind of this persona of perfection. And it's very freeing to be able to say, I don't know, and I'm okay with that, and I'm very grateful to attend a church here in Denver that really embraces that concept and is very comfortable with people from all walks of life saying, here we are, and we may not have the answers, but that's okay, and we can doubt, and we can wonder, and we can question together. And I love that they've created that space.
Is it a denomination?
It's a non-denominational church. It's called Highlands Church. I don't know if you're familiar with Mark Tidd, but he's one of the founding pastors and has really been on a huge journey himself. He was part of another denomination church and was going to branch out and do a church plant, but had gone on this journey himself of becoming inclusive of LGBT people when he met a family that had a transgender child. and it really rocked his faith and rocked his world and caused him to kind of go on his own journey. And so when he decided that he wanted to church plant but make it inclusive, the part of the denomination of the church that he was a part of said absolutely not. And he did it anyways, and he lost his funding, and they defrocked him and took away all their support, but he went and did it anyways. And he has been a huge catalyst, even though he's doing it quietly in a lot of ways, a huge catalyst for a lot of these other churches that have then changed their stance on LGBT inclusion or whatever. A lot of them have come and visited our church here as a model for what they've wanted to do at their church.
That's outstanding. That's great.
Well, good on him. So one of the things that I picture is, let's just say somebody, maybe in old Western times, just pre-culture, pre-industrial or technology, and just some naive person comes in out of the forest, and they've had this supernatural encounter with X. Like, we don't have a word for it yet. We don't know what it is. And this young, naive person comes and says, hey, I just had this really neat experience with what, I don't know, but it might be the creator of the universe. It might be the source. It might be where I come from and the meaning of life. And I've just had this epiphany, and it was so great. And then some snake oil salesman steps up and he says, well, I can tell you exactly what happened. And you've just encountered Beelzebub, or you've just encountered Ben or Joey. We've got a name for that experience and that person, and his name is Joey. And he doesn't like pork, and he doesn't like fags, and he doesn't like cloth made of two different textiles, and he doesn't want you working on the Sabbath, and and so all these fucking specifics get laid on this kid who just came out of the forest having had an experience.
Yeah,
I'm glad to hear you drop the word agnostic, because when the more humble people get about this subject, the healthier they're going to be, the more amiable they're going to be with others that think or had a different experience, and the more intolerant they're going to be of snake oil salesmen who try to build a scaffolding around this thing that's unexplainable. It's this beautiful thing that you have, Amber, and I think you just said it best. You said, look, I had to quarantine my personal experiences with what I consider to be my God with the experiences that people had imposed on me in the name of their God, which I can tell you by trait is a very different God.
Yes.
And I'm going to stick to my God. You stick to yours. It happens to make you an asshole. Mine makes me a nice person.
Yeah.
And so I'm sticking to my story. This is my God, and you don't have any say. And Bob and I don't have any say in what you believe, Amber. You don't have any say in what we believe. But what we are hoping that the things that we extract or that we collect from the world and we make a part of our theological or ideological repertoire makes us a nice person.
Yeah.
And you come all the way back to something I think Jesus said, that how will you know my disciples? Their love for one another. And what's the greatest commandment? Well, it's hate fags, number one. Number two, hate abortion or whatever. All these things that Jesus never said.
Right.
And so if you stick, I think progressive Christians have a leg to stand on, in that they can say we're sticking to the red letter stuff that we value the most. Now, there's red letter stuff that they have to discard as well. And earlier you used the word, a lot of Christians are quote unquote guilty of cherry picking. I don't call it guilt. It's the only way to read any text. And I don't care if it's Holy Writ or if it's Moby Dick. You're going to read stuff that is like, I agree with that, or I don't agree with that, or I don't like that, or I do like that. That's just everybody being autonomy, human agency, exercising your free will to, actually, I don't know if I'd call it free will, but exercising your agency to build the life that you want to build. And so I don't condemn anybody for cherry picking. I actually endorse it because everybody does it. And so there shouldn't be any shame in it.
No, I was going to say, I think it's a lot through the lens of our own experience. We read anything through the lens of our own experience and how we understand it. So I agree with you on that point. But I think what we're guilty of, and what I think no matter what you believe, is moving away from the us versus them mentality, especially in, I think Christians and evangelicals are so guilty of that, well, we have all the right answers, and if you don't believe like us, then we're going to minister to you in order to make you believe like us and make you one of us. So it's all, there's always a motive behind it instead of just loving without conditions attached, And I think I found that a lot in my research this year, even as I've looked back on my own life, of how much even my parents, their love, I'm finding, comes with conditions. It comes with strings attached. Mm-hmm. We love you if you follow our rules, if you do what we say, if you represent us well, it's all based on appearances and those strings. And I think the more we can get away from having those strings attached to our love for one another and this kind of manipulative thing of, well, you just need to become one of us, we can embrace our differences and our diversity and see how much more beautiful the world is with everyone in it.
Yeah. Amber, we've never met. I don't know you. You don't know me. But I do know this. You're a person. You're a human. You're part of my tribe of humanity. I want good for you. When I look at you, I look at me. Would never want to hurt you, no matter who you are, because if I'd be hurting you, I'd hurt me. You know what I mean? Because that's how I see things. I guess the question is, how do you reconcile this notion of hell in your Christianity? Or maybe it's not there anymore. Maybe you don't have hell in your Christianity. Or do you?
If I'm totally honest, it's something I still am kind of figuring through, because certainly what I was taught to believe as a child isn't lining up with what I believe now. Mm-hmm. And I don't really know what that means for the end result, but it's something that I'm still just kind of contemplating and working through. And, I know there's a lot of people like Rob Bell that just say that hell doesn't exist at all. And that's certainly, like I said, very contrary to what you believe as a evangelical Christian, because without hell, then what's the point of Jesus? And then, your whole faith kind of crumbles again on a different issue. But I think that's one of those areas that I'm kind of okay saying that I don't really know right now. And I don't know what that looks like. I certainly don't think it looks the way we were taught for it to believe. I don't believe that God is going to send all these people to hell just because they failed to hear the message of Christ or pray the sinner's prayer, or because they lived in a tribe in Calcutta that didn't hear this message of Jesus the right way, or, I don't believe that is God's plan or his design. And so I don't know what that does necessarily look like, because then you have people who, well, what about all the murderers and all the people that have done so much harm to humanity, and, and is there justice for them? And those are things that I don't really know how all that pans out. And I don't have to, thankfully.
So you're agnostic when it comes to hell.
Exactly.
Yeah. I will say this, Amber, and I'm like Bob. We don't know you, but we love you as a fellow human. But I'm going to warn you that if you honestly, if you don't distance yourself from, if you can become an annihilationist, you can become a universalist. But I think there's something extremely toxic about believing that God would send one human soul for eternal torture. Because
I agree with you.
10,000 years of torture, and you're just getting started.
Yeah. No,
So
I agree with you.
If there's one, so you can say God sends them to a place separate from him, and they just lose consciousness, annihilationism. That's at least merciful. But I will not. I don't think you can be and have a good person or have a good heart if you continue to hold space for one human soul to be tortured forever. That's my fair warning. But okay, but
I agree with you.
You said something earlier. I too, like yourself, in my first 39 years of being immersed in evangelicalism, I too resented and didn't like the us and them that seemed to be so prevalent. But I'm going to tell you, coming out of Christianity and entering in the atheist movement and different things, and actually the political right and left, I am currently in and am witnessing tribes that have a very similar devotion to us and them superiority and inferiority. And I'm
politically,
yeah. Like a hardcore left liberal definitely feels as self-righteous as an evangelical many times.
Yeah.
you are unenlightened, you are ignorant, I'm enlightened, I have the right, and you are in the wrong. And the thing is that very well may be true, but here's my theory. And one of the things that I say a lot about my deconversion, especially in context of my mom, like just being just completely distraught about me losing my faith, is I try to tell people, look, in my mind and in my heart, everything changed. But I actually believe at the same time, nothing changed. And what I mean by that is people are people, and they are who they are. And no matter what ideology hat they put on, if they were an asshole Christian, they're going to be an asshole atheist. If they were an asshole conservative, they're going to be an asshole liberal. Meaning it has everything to do with their own personal insecurity, self-loathing, just inferiority. They feel like they have to elevate themselves at others' expense. They have to find somebody to bully so they can feel better about themselves, and they're gonna apply whatever ideology they happen to be adopting at that point in their life. And so I'm just that's just an observation about Christians being us and them. Well, us and them is everywhere.
I agree. No, we have to be so careful as we deconstruct our faith and as we move along this line of progressive Christianity that we don't just flip the coin and become the exact opposite, because otherwise, if we just go at it with as much vengeance and hate as they do, we're becoming like the very people we oppose, and that's that's not helpful to anyone.
Yeah. So, my gosh, your journey is so hard, and yet I hear in your voice that you and your wife both are saying, okay, we're going to be on the limelight, bring it. Because we want to see change. I don't want another person to have to sit down with their parents and experience this pain that I have. And so the more we can help stretch people's paradigms and help people get over their homophobia, or help people realize that Paul may have been gay himself and was just hating himself, or maybe he was talking about pedophilia, or maybe Leviticus was just talking about something else, or maybe men who wrote the Bible were co-opting the name of God to pass on their own agenda. I mean, people have to, I don't know, people have to get a lot more humble about stuff that's just marginal to the real issues.
Yes.
And keep the main thing the main thing. And that's what's not happening right now in Christendom. Is they're completely derailed by issues that Jesus never mentioned.
Yeah.
All right, that's my platform. So
no, it's very disheartening, and at times it's like I'm embarrassed to call myself a Christian, or I'm embarrassed to say I was an evangelical, or right now I'm embarrassed to be American. It's just the things that are going on in the name of God are just embarrassing.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you're embarrassed. You should be.
We all should be.
I am.
Yeah.
And I'm with you. And I hear that. Like I said, with Corey Benjamin's posts and all my Christian friends' posts, they're all just.
Do you follow John Pavlovich at all?
I do. He's great.
He's another one. Yeah.
So one of my favorite Christians we've had on the show is a guy named David Dark. He's right here in Nashville. And he's not as famous as the other people that I've mentioned, but he wrote a book called Life's Too Short to Pretend You're Not Religious. and the sacredness of questioning everything. He basically sees that it's a Christian virtue to question everything. And not something to be afraid of. Okay, so what do you and Clara do for fun?
Oh gosh, we love to travel. We love to go out and go to the mountains for the weekend, and we've got 2 small dogs that we love to just spend time with and go for long walks or go for a hike, and we love being outdoors. And
that's great. What kind of dogs?
I've got one that is a Shih Tzu Maltese mix. Her name is Half Pint.
Okay.
Yes, from like Little House on the Prairie, Half Pint. And and she is 7, and she's actually my service dog for PTSD. And so she's travels with me quite often. And then we have a new addition to our family that is a Maltese Yorkie.
And
those are
little
cute. Anne. Yeah, little Anne is our little
That's terrific.
Who knew a pair of lesbians with dogs? I don't.
Yeah, who
Really?
thought?
Do you guys go to the movies? You see films at all? Or?
We do on occasion. We've seen a few recently. We saw the Sully movie, which I thought was really well done, and with Tom Hanks. And we do see movies on occasion, and we also just love watching movies at home. Next to the fire and just kind of hanging out at home. Yeah. We don't have a lot of free time between our crazy busy lives, so we like to just kind of chill. We're spending a week in Breckenridge next week after the holiday, and just gonna kind of chill out there for a week.
That'll be fun. Absolutely. Do you also have a job, Amber, or this is what your job is now, writing the book? Or
I've been a sign language interpreter for 12 years, and so I've nationally certified and have done that. Through the Springs and in Denver for quite a long time. But I am moving more away from that and more into activism and for LGBT people. And so with writing my book, that's certainly taken a huge chunk of my time this year.
Oh, absolutely.
And I expect it to take a huge chunk of my time next year.
When will it be out? When can we expect it?
We should have a release date in the next few weeks, but I'm expecting kind of late spring is what I'm hoping for.
So, Amber, when you mentioned Little House on the Prairie, I immediately thought of that's probably one of the few videos you were allowed to watch growing up.
Yes, that would be one of the few.
Oh, come on, let's list some of the stuff that we were. Because my wife and I, were pretty conservative when our kids were young, and we would watch.
Little House was a big one. Dick Van Dyke was one.
Oh, okay. We bought the series of Opie and Auntie M.
Andy Griffith.
Andy Griffith series.
Andy Griffith.
Yep,
so we could watch that. We didn't have cable because you never knew what was going to pop up.
Exactly.
Kids,
we turned that off. We turned off cable.
Yeah.
But Anna Green Gables was one of our.
Oh, Anna Green Gables for sure.
Pastimes.
Yeah.
Yep.
There was one little horse movie, I think. I forget what it was called. Spirit.
Okay, I don't know.
Now I think we ventured out and let them watch. Sound of Music.
Oh, that was huge.
Yeah.
Music. And we just watched that last night, actually.
Yeah. Yay. We didn't let them watch Wizard of Oz because we thought the flying monkeys were scary.
Oh, the flying monkeys. And a witch is in it. My gosh.
She's pretty scary too. There was Princess Bride.
Oh, yeah.
That was okay?
Yep. That was okay.
That was classic.
All right, so I know you're writing a book, but sometimes are you reading anything right now?
My life. Over and over and over and over. But I think probably one of the best books that I've read this past year was Kathy Baldock's Walking the Bridgeless Canyon. She's done a phenomenal job. She's an LGBT ally and done a phenomenal job of researching the history of LGBT people from all aspects, not just biblically, but also medically and socially and psychology. And so she brings all these together, and it is just the most fascinating read on history, to realize what has brought us to the point that we are now, in America at least.
No, that sounds really cool. What's the name again?
Yeah, say that again.
Walking the Bridgeless Canyon.
Walking the Bridgeless Canyon.
I'm going to have to check
Kathy Baldock.
And it's Kathy Baldock. Where do I know that name?
She's pretty closely associated with Matthew Vines and the Reformation Project.
Oh, yeah, she's the mountain climber thing.
Yes, that's her.
I'm friends with her on Facebook. Yeah, she's a Christian ally.
Yes.
Yeah, she's another one that's very vocal. And
yes, she's very vocal. I not only read her book this last year, but I got to attend her workshop just a couple of months ago, and it was just the most fascinating thing. She's so knowledgeable, and the fact that she took time to research all this when she has no connection to gay people in her family, or it's really astounding, very fascinating.
Yeah, she's impressive. She's really taken up the cause.
She really is.
And, I have a lot of respect. I've said this many times on the show, and you might relate to this, Amber, that in my latter years, I'd already deconverted hell. Like, I didn't believe in hell. I didn't believe in the inerrancy of Scripture. I didn't even believe in substitutionary atonement. And I was gay affirming. But yet I was still a pastor, and a lot of that I had to keep on the down low because I was so determined to reform from within.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I tried and tried and tried, and eventually I just don't have the tact. I don't have the patience.
Yeah.
And so when I look at Kathy Baldock and yourself and people that are still inside Christendom trying to help it grow the fuck up.
Yeah.
I have all the respect in the world for you, and I applaud you. I just couldn't do it myself. I don't have the tools to be that patient, and so I appreciate it.
Yeah, it definitely has its days. There's moments where I'm like, oh, you have got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
I do not want to be associated with this any longer. Take my name off the board,
Yeah.
So there's definitely some hard days, and then there's days where I get, messages from people who have been deeply influenced by Focus on the Family and this, and and they're in the same position that I was in 5 years ago or 7 years ago or 10 years ago. And I'm like, oh my gosh, somebody has got to help these people,
Yeah.
Sure.
deconstruct this box that they're living in so that they can actually fully live and not end up taking their life to suicide because they were told they would never measure up, and that so closely could have been me. Thankfully, it was not, but it very easily could have been. Both Claire and I both had, points in our life where we reached a point of feeling like suicide was our only option. And the fact that we were both able to walk out of that, really fuels my passion for reaching other people that feel so ostracized because of their upbringing or who their parents are or what their community is like.
It happens a lot.
It happens so much.
Yeah. And you climbed out of that hole, and we're grateful that you did.
Yes.
So one other question that just came to mind. You live in a state where recreational marijuana is legal. Do you?
Yes, I do.
Do you partake?
I do not, although we have. It's kind of a long story, but I now have chronic pain because I was injured by a chiropractor 3 years ago.
Oh, dear.
And so we have talked about looking into some of the options of,
Medicinal, yeah.
I think there's some ointments and that kind of thing that are
sure.
infused.
You don't have to smoke it.
Yeah. No, but
absolutely.
that we've known a lot of people that it's been very helpful for their medical issues or whatever. And
well, be sure and tell your mom and dad whenever you get that ointment. That'll help. That might. That'll help relations. I'm pretty sure.
Over real bonding experience.
Yeah.
But it's done huge things for the economy here in Denver. It is just substantially. Yeah, I mean, it's just to the point that Denver can't even keep up. When we were buying a home a year ago, it just was absolutely insane trying to get a home with the market because so many people were moving here for that very reason that the demand just couldn't keep up. And so it's starting to slow down a little bit now, I think, but it was just incredible the things people were doing, waiving appraisals and buying a house without ever seeing it. And just crazy shit that they were doing to get a home because the demand was so high.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So it's definitely done a lot for the economy.
Right. So, Amber, you feel good about our talk? You have anything you want to say in conclusion?
No, I feel great. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to talk with me and listen to my story. And I always enjoy hearing. I think it takes a lot of humility to be in a space where you're okay to say that you don't know.
Yeah.
And I think that's a space that we need to all arrive at more. Yeah. And have a lot of grace for one another. So I love what you guys are doing. And
well, thanks.
Well, we wish you the best of luck on the book. And if there's,
thank you.
If there's any way we can promote it more than what we are already doing by
when
having
it comes out.
Thanks, I appreciate it. Yeah, I'll let you guys know when we get the release date set. So
and I've said this many times, Amber, that I don't think Christianity is going anywhere for at least another 100 years. And so the reason why I celebrate you guys that are reforming and making it a nicer space and a nicer factory, you're putting out nicer people and are less toxic for society and culture, is that we're going to share the planet. We have to share the planet with Christians and Muslims and so the best thing I think we can do is applaud those that are reforming from within, that are moderates, and that are smart and kind and keeping the main thing. So good on you. We're happy to talk to you and support your work.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
The book is Refocusing My Family, coming out, being cast out, and discovering the true love of God.
Yeah.
So she hasn't given up on God yet.
No.
And maybe that's fine.
Oh, well, it's to each his own. I mean, she has something that, and we could say an experience, or she could say just a friendship with God, or she feels something. She sees the world and she sees design.
Right.
She sees the world and she sees meaning. I mean, we're all meaning making, and this is the meaning she's given it. And as hard, almost like a rodeo bronco, a bull, as hard as Christianity tried to buck her and says, "You're not one of us, you faggot." You're not. I mean, her own mother and father.
I know.
Kicked her. Don't recognize her existence. Yeah. And yet she says, "All right, your God is an asshole, but the God that you somehow indirectly and accidentally gave me from childhood, that became a part of my construct. I'm keeping him. But fuck you."
Yeah, he loves me.
Yeah, he loves me,
right.
and he loves me unconditionally, which is something that you don't know.
Do. That's right.
And so, it's tough. Bless her heart. Yeah. I mean, I don't know what to say. It's just tragic, and
I know. I could tell you were quite moved by it.
Well, I've had to sit down with people, not in a gay coming out type of way, but other issues where I knew this was going to be hard for them to hear. And the prayer that I talked about leading up to that, she's a Christian, so she prayed her ass off. She fasted, I bet. I mean, you're really beseeching God, please lay the groundwork for their hearts to be primed for this information, because this is going to be a tough conversation. And the stakes are high. It could go really, really south. And so you go in. It's a conversation you have to have. It's not comfortable. It's not fun. You'd rather not be having it. But you have the courage to go in and do it in hopes that something, the best case scenario will happen. And the worst happened. And so suicide, I'm glad to hear her mention that, look, this got real for me and her wife. Yeah. And how many, and I meant to ask her if homosexual was even a PC word anymore, but for now, how many gay people just find the world that they're in intolerable of them, and it's not safe, it's not pleasant, it's not fun, and it doesn't have any hopes. The It Gets Better campaign
doesn't work.
Didn't reach them or whatever. Right. It doesn't look like it's going to get better. I'm out. Happens a lot.
Yeah.
Way, way too much. And so it's tragic. And so, messages like hers, books like hers, if people need the love of God, they need to have a God, then Amber's saying you can be gay and have your God too. You can have your cake and eat it too.
Okay.
And
if she feels good like that, that's fine.
I don't care. I mean, life's hard enough.
I know. I just look at her and think, oh, Amber, just let go. For God's sakes. I mean, just have a lovely life,
Yeah. Oh, it is.
It
is. What she doesn't realize yet, and I don't mean to condescend her, but she doesn't maybe understand yet is that, to some degree, the need to keep God on a leash, the need to keep God in the picture, the need to hang on to meaning-making storytelling patterns that you've adopted, sometimes unknowingly to the user, complicate your life unnecessarily.
Yeah.
And that's what you're saying.
Yeah, thank you. I was wondering what I was saying.
Well,
but that's really it. It sounds like it's complicated. It's overly complicated. You don't need that.
Yeah.
Let go of that.
I wonder how much.
You're
a
lovely person,
Yeah, of course. But I wonder how much you're straight, I'm straight.
Yeah.
And we have our wives.
We don't understand.
We can go into a restaurant and hold hands with our wives and not fear getting beat up. So some of what some of her world is not relatable to you and I.
Right.
And so I'm just saying that we were sitting here saying, your life would be so much less complicated. Well, she's like, you don't know anything about complicated.
Yeah, and you don't know anything about me. And she's right.
This is the nuance. This is the high wire that we walk with people. Is we want so badly to fix them or whatever, and yet we also want them to have the same freedoms that we appreciate. Yeah. Don't tell me what to think. Don't tell me what to do. I'm working this out the best I can. Man, that's just at the end of the day. That's my heart. Is that this life is hard.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know. I mean, like, I know some people are judgmental of my smoking or whatever. And look, it's like, it gives me pleasure. And yeah, it might shave some years off my life. But, I'm maybe I'm more into quality than quantity right now. Maybe I'm just that hard up for something to give my life pleasure every now and then. It's a small pleasure and it might cost me some years. I don't know. But at the end of the day, cut me some slack, and this is how I'm fighting my battles. I'm not telling you how to fight yours, or at least I'm trying not to.
Right.
in this very show.
Yes.
I'm trying not to tell Amber how to fight her battles.
Yes, and please, Amber, know that I don't mean that in the sense that I'm trying to tell you what to do.
No, but your perspective is valuable.
I feel for her.
Yeah.
And it's like, geez, it's more complications than you need.
She sounds very mature.
Oh, yeah.
And she
very
sounds
smart. Very smart.
And when you're that mature and you're that smart, you're thick-skinned.
Yeah.
And so she's not going to be offended by you. She knows who she is, and she knows what she wants and needs, and she gets your story is different than hers. I don't think there's any offense taken.
Okay. All right. Good.
Getting back to, like Trump, I mean, the reason I just listed two attributes, smart and mature.
Right.
And those things contribute to thick skin. And I don't know how smart he is, but I know he's not mature.
Trump, you mean?
Yeah. And so part of his thin-skinnedness, and I don't know how I got political all of a sudden, but it just reminded me of how, she brought it into where it's like there's so much about her camp, her tribe, Christianity, that embarrasses them on a daily basis. And Trump's support has been a big setback for evangelicals. I don't know, you probably don't have many Christians on your Facebook feed.
That I know.
I have several, and especially all the 30 people that were ever on the show. And they're having to put out some serious fires, or at least, they are watching years of progress within their movement, Christianity, getting dialed back by the second, with.
Yeah, this may cause some people on the, on the edge to jump ship. I mean, it may cause.
That's what I said in my rant, my 30-minute diatribe or whatever. It may. I think it is going to be. Well, we've said this before on the show. There's several catalytic moments for people, 9/11, but a big one, maybe probably literally the biggest of all the guests, several of them have said, it started when I watched how my peeps, Christianity, were handling the LGBT, and I said, no, that's not my people anymore. If that's what it means to be Christian, to be a bigot and to be a hater and to be a homophobe, I'm out.
Yeah.
So if, like what you're saying is, it's like, okay, if it means, if my peeps are supporting Trump and believe that he's this Messiah, I'm out. Yeah. So it could be that for people.
Could be. We'll see.
All right. Good show.
All right. Thanks,
good talk.
Man. Yeah, always good. We should do another one, I think.
I think so.
People are looking forward to it.
Let's hope.
Let's do it. All right.
Bye-bye.
See you later.
Hey y'all, this is Tucker from the Atheist in the Trailer Park podcast. And I might live in a beer can, but I ain't no inbred redneck. And if you listen to my podcast, I'm gonna learn you something. And no, I ain't talking about how to marry your cousin and not have kids with 16 fingers and stuff like that. I mean, I actually talk about real stuff and teach people where the Bible stole its stories from. So y'all give me a listen, would you? Thank you.